it can't be a week of football without Chelsea being in the news. Even if it's the international break, Chelsea are again in the news. They're not buying players for once, but there seem to be some tensions between Todd Boehly and I think the other ownership parts of Chelsea. So I'm not that well versed with this, but Rohit will explain what's going on. So Rohit, first tell me what is the ownership structure at Chelsea, because I used to think that Todd Boehly runs the show and he was a part of Clearlake Capital, but I'm clearly mistaken.
Yeah, so essentially it's a very complicated structure right now, right? So Chelsea is owned by like multiple different people now, but the two main kind of factions are Clearlake Capital, which is a private equity fund out of California. They own around 62% of the share, and the second biggest stake is Todd Boehly and some of his other billionaire buddies, right? So there's the Clear Lake Capital, which is led by Behdad Iqbali, who's basically an investment banker, and Jose Feliciano. They're basically both part of the Clear Lake Capital. And then Boli and Weiss and all of these guys, they are the other part, right? So when Abramovich had to sell Chelsea, these are the guys who ended up buying it, and that entire process was also very contentious because there were multiple people who were trying to buy Chelsea, but I think they spent like 4 or 4.5 billion pounds to buy Chelsea, and all of that money is somewhere lying. It's supposed to go towards Ukraine, but I don't know what's happened to it. But the obvious thing to say back then was, this is such a big purchase. There are such big personalities. There are bound to be clashes. But we didn't know that it would come to basically, the conclusion that is happening just 2 years down the line, right? Another kind of bit of a background about Boli and why everybody thinks that Boli is the one who's calling the shots is when they bought over this conglomerate bought over Chelsea. Boli was the face of the buyers, right? And Boli was the person who actually ran the club for the first year or so. When we didn't have any structure, right? There were no sporting directors or technical directors. Boli actually did all the signings. I think that's why a lot of people think that Todd Boehly is the face. And also the fact that he's the guy from the sporting world, right? He owns the Dodgers, the baseball outfit in Major League Baseball in the US, and I think he has stakes in some other sports as well. So I think he's the kind of sports facing guy. So that's basically, what the structure is right now. And now what has happened is essentially, the inevitable in many ways when two people with like billions of dollars and big egos clash, right? Things have not worked out on the pitch. Obviously, we've talked about it. We've had multiple managers, a very scattergun approach to the transfers. And of course, the results have not been there, which is obvious. It's more of a symptom than the main root cause, right? The results are a symptom. If you don't put a good structure, don't have a long term vision. And the reason for that is kind of, it seems like it's basically, all of this ownership troubles behind the scene. Boli has a certain vision, and the Clear Lake Capital guys have a certain vision. And I think a bit of conjecture on my end. The Clear Lake Capital guys, obviously, they are investment bankers, private equity fund. They care more about the money and the value and their stakes and all of that. Boli is more of a sports guy. I don't know whether that's true or not. So an interesting thing that I'd like to talk about is like the difference in the approach in transfers over the last few years. When Boli was in charge in the first season or so, we bought guys like Sterling, Kalidou Koulibaly, and all of these guys, older people who had a pretty good reputation, who were supposed to transform Chelsea and all of that. And I still remember Chelsea really went after Cristiano Ronaldo,
Yeah,
right
yeah.
before he rejoined Manchester United, right? So you could clearly see, this is somebody who wants to bring in the big names, try and, get that marquee signing, so to speak. But since then, apparently Boli's influence has gone down, and these guys were all Boli's signings. And obviously Chelsea didn't do well. Tuchel got fired, and then the other guys in Clearlake Capital, Behdad Iqbali and all of these guys, they have taken over. And we've talked about how Chelsea now looks at each of their signings as an asset, as a stock, so to speak. They try to buy relatively low and relatively early, although still people will call those values inflated. But if Chelsea are going to spend 40, 50 million pounds, they try to spend that on a younger player, right, whose value will only go up in time. So either, he plays well, gets integrated in the team, wins accolades like a Cole Palmer, or, he gets sold off for a profit, minor profit. We had a bunch of players that, got sold from Chelsea without having played any games. Omari Hutchinson was one, Angelo Gabriel was one. These are guys who got sold for pure profit, right? So that's basically become the current structure. And then that has also caused a lot of heartburn among the Chelsea fans because Chelsea have had to sell a lot of our homegrown talent for pure profit. Conor Gallagher to Atletico Madrid. Trevor Chalobah was sent to train, with the bomb squad, so to speak, and he got loaned out to Crystal Palace. And so you could see this kind of very different scattergun approach. And a lot of the Chelsea fans were saying, don't worry, the ownership have a good idea in mind. They have a good future in mind. It's a good project. Believe in the project. We've talked about the project, right? But it seems like they were basically busy fighting. So there was no project.
Yeah. So
there were, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So what's happened now? Like they want to
Yeah.
kick out Boehly. Is that? I mean, is that the gist?
So
is that simple?
I think it's not just kick out, right? Because it's very difficult to kick out anybody in the current structure because each of these major factions have like a veto power per se on who gets to sell, who gets to buy their shares, and all of that. So it's basically a mess now. If things don't go down the amicable path, it's going to be bad, right? If one side is forced to sell, it's not going to be good. There's probably going to be the courts and the legal system involved. So I think what's basically going on behind the back is again, clash of egos. Both these sides have different visions of Chelsea. Another kind of thorn has been the renovation of Stamford Bridge. Stamford Bridge is Chelsea's home ground. It's a relatively small ground. I think 42,000 people compared to like 60, 70,000 that the bigger clubs get. That's a lot of revenue down the drain. They were supposed to, get moving on renovating it or, expanding it, but there's been no movement. That's basically obviously because of money differences. And so all of these different approaches and how the team should play, what kind of players you should buy, the entire stadium thing has basically caused this rift. And it's obvious that, the Boehly faction, the Clear Lake Capital faction with Iqbali, they don't see eye to eye now. They have very different visions for the club. And I really don't know what's going to happen. A easy giveaway for this was very interesting. Chelsea's match against Man City, Todd Boehly was in the director's box. And, when Chelsea conceded the second goal, Mateo Kovacic scored, he was visibly, mad and angry and dejected, and he left. That was a little strange to me personally because it's the first game of the season. You have a new manager, right? It's against Man City, 2-0. Given everything, it's not that bad of a performance or that bad of an outcome. Why is this guy, who should understand, right, who has ostensibly taken part in appointing this new coach, he should understand that, you got to give them time. But now it's clear that he probably had nothing to do with appointing Maresca and the signings and all of that right now. And so obviously he's probably mad at the direction in which Chelsea is headed and the signings and all of that stuff. And that's where we stand. That's the deadlock that we are at currently.
Almost 92% of people who view our reels and content are not subscribed to us. Please do subscribe to us. It helps us a lot. It's insane. So, just to be clear, so if Todd Boehly has to sell, what is the process like? What's next for Chelsea? Because obviously this is your dirty laundry being basically washed out in public. This is the last thing you need. The last thing you need after what all has happened since Abramovich sold the club.
Oh man.
So how does this? I mean, what's going to happen next? I mean, this is terrible for all parties involved, as I can see.
Absolutely. The news that has come out is, they basically they want to separate, right? But how that's going to happen, nobody knows, right? There was a news piece that said, Boehly wants to buy out Clear Lake Capital, and Clear Lake Capital came out and said that, no, we want to buy you out. We're not going to sell our stake. Let me buy you out. So basically now, finger pointing happening like the Spider-Man meme, both pointing at each other. Yeah.
So I'm looking at the stuff, right? And apparently the buyout could exceed something like 1.5 billion pounds. or something around
Yeah.
2.5 billion pounds, which is an insane amount of money.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
do you see maybe Bowley, if he's bought out, again investing in another club at all?
Maybe, but he definitely will not, buy it out as a part of a conglomerate now. If he wants to buy something, he'll
Yeah.
go out on his own. But the problem right now is the amount of money involved are so huge. It's very hard for like one single person to buy it, right? There has to be some sort of a consortium, and the problem right now is I don't think the 1.5 billion is a big amount, especially for Clear Lake Capital, because they're a private equity fund. They can probably go to their billionaire friends and
Uh,
raise that in a month, right? The
they
problem
have
is
it in
going to
their
be, it's
pockets.
going to be hard. Yeah, probably, but it's going to be very hard to force somebody like Bowley to sell because he's a sports guy, right? He has Dodgers,
Mhm.
and Dodgers is a very successful franchise. He will not want his legacy in soccer, I'm using the word soccer, to be that of a failed owner, right? And these guys with their big egos, they're not going to let go easily. Let's see what happens. And like I said, each of these guys have a veto power, so you never know. The only sad part about Chelsea is we kept telling ourselves that there's a project, there's a overarching kind of vision that these guys have in mind, but clearly they didn't. So now all of the horrible transfer decisions, the coaching decisions that have happened, just make you feel even worse in hindsight. But I guess that's just being a Chelsea fan, a day's work for a Chelsea fan.
Yeah. So when you had Abramovich on your side, I think a lot of the fans were cursing you. I think those curses are finally coming into play. It's like they all came true now. Now deal with it. Oh my
True,
God.
true, true, true,
It's
true.
insane, insane. So that's
Okay.
it about Chelsea for now. For now, I'm sure next week when we sit for the episodes, we'll have something more to discuss because for sure, Bowley will not go down fighting. This guy, obviously, clearly, Capital will have their guns ready. So it's going to be interesting, an interesting season for Chelsea fans. We were worried about Maresca. I don't know if Bowley will survive the season. Do you think he'll survive the season?
I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to Chelsea. I don't know what's going to happen with this ownership structure. But with that perpetual indecision with Chelsea ownership, we can end this episode and then see everybody next week and see how this new saga turns.